Good morning, everybody, and happy Monday to you. My name is Keith Salmon from Keith Salmon Coaching. And this is the Million Dollar Story Series, where I bring people with fantastic stories to resonate with you and your journey on this show so that we can inspire you if you're having any second thoughts about taking action in your dream, vision, your new business, if you're a new entrepreneur, whatever it is. So you are here to learn and to get inspired. I'm really honored to have this morning Christine Voreza on. She joins us from Fort Worth, Texas this morning. And welcome aboard, Christine.
Thank you, Keith. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. It's really exciting. I've bumped into Christine a few times out there in the internet, and she's got an interesting story, an interesting background. And a lot of times what I like to do on the show is I call it a game of synchronicity. Mm-hmm. If you are the viewer and you are listening to stories over and over, sometimes you may hear the same story a million times. And if you are in the right place at the right time and hear the right story and are ready to receive it, it may indeed change your life and your path and your journey. So we all have had those reasons that we've pursued our dreams. And Christine is here to tell us how she did it. But what Christine is a pricing expert. And for me to tell you what a pricing expert, I've got a semi-decent idea what that is. But this is where I would love for Christine to tell us what exactly that means. And then we'll take it from there. Do you mind? I mean, you're from Fort Worth, but I know you've got a different story. But we'll get into your story. But just let us know so we can visualize and kind of get an idea how that.
Sure, of course. Thank you for that introduction, Keith. I'm really, really great and happy to be here. So when you really think about a pricing expert, is someone who helps business owners, entrepreneurs, companies, large or small, to leverage the power of price or pricing so they can attain maximum profits and sales in their business. And it's really an area that is very, very niche. And it's an area that is actually growing a lot more within large organizations and also small organizations. So I like to say it this way, like there are just 4 different profit levers, or literally just that profit levers that you can pull in your business to gain maximum profit. So think about it like in your coaching business or anybody who's selling a product or a service, there are only certain items that they can do in order to increase their sales and increase their profit. And either that you're increasing your price, you're playing with your volume, you're reducing your cost, which is the direct cost of the products that you're making or services, or you're reducing the cost of your operations. So only those 4 things go into impact profit in any business. And there's a study that was done a long time ago by a consulting company called McKinsey. And they literally were trying to change different levels of those 4 components, like by increasing and reducing by 1% to see what has the maximum impact to a company's performance. And price came at the top. So there's a lot of power with just leveraging your price and using your price for your products and services to attain your business goals. So I, as a pricing expert, I have over 6 years of experience just purely in pricing. But I also have a lot more experience in marketing, branding, and sales within my corporate career. But my recent experience has been in pricing, and that's what I love, and that's what I teach, and that's what I help people, businesses and entrepreneurs, leverage in their business to attain their success. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. So obviously you're passionate about it, and that's part of this whole reason that you're here. So I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. So would you call yourself would you come into a business as a consultant and sort of like take a overhead look at the view of where things are, those components that you were talking about, the levers and just sort of assess and then
yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would call myself a business consultant. So what happens is you start by looking at a company from a point of view of, okay, how are you doing today? And most often you find that most companies don't even have don't understand that you need to have a pricing strategy, because it's a plan that you put in place that enables you to perform throughout the operation of your business. And it defines many things that you do, from your marketing to your promotions, everything that you do around price. So I come in as a consultant to help your business just understand that. And then there's also a process for those who do not know how to set prices. There's a process of setting prices. There's a process of communication. There's a process of retaining policies in place to ensure that you're doing it the right way. There's measurement for profitability and making sure that you're still making money at the end of the day. So there's a lot of facets when it comes to that. But I do come in as a consultant for your business.
Right. So would you be able to, say, take a hypothetical and a person who, let's say, I mean, I'll let you pick someone who has a like a service business, say a coaching business,
right.
or would you be able to say someone who has a small chain of hardware stores, just for crazy example for visualization, and would you have I mean, obviously everybody's different and everybody's got their whole set of circumstances.
Yeah.
So if they find you or you find them, and then that first conversation, is there something that you could tell us about that first conversation with you? Is it abstract? Is it abstract for people, or is it pretty easy for you to bring them down to earth on what you've been talking about?
So very, very good question, actually. So the way you talked about the small, either the coaching business or the other product-based hardware store. So different companies have different objectives, and different companies or business people sell different products and services. So the first initial point of conversation is usually trying to understand what objectives they have. Some people's objective is actually just to get the most amount of sales that they can, and they probably do not care so much about what cost goes into it, right? And some other businesses' objective is to make sure that they have a specific clientele or in the market. Others care about brand position. Others just care about being, at the top of their category. They want to be the most premium brand. Others don't care about that. So different stories for different companies really just differ. And so we start from a point of view of like a discovery connection call of understanding, okay, what is it that you really want to achieve short term and long term for your business? And we work backwards to identify the path that we'll take to get you to that success future, if you can say that. But also part of my role is also to educate people about the function that pricing plays in your business. So a lot of times these two scenarios that we're talking about, a lot of times it's upon me to let them know, okay, if you follow this path, then this is what is likely to happen positively or negatively. And then if you follow this other path, this is what is likely to happen. So it's an education and allowing the client or the customer to know that these are the different paths that they can take, and just broadening the scope for them in the event that they did not know so much about how pricing could play a role in their business.
Right. It reminds me, I've done a lot of work in the car advertising business as a post-production and film editor. And, we basically, at the end of the day, we put the price on at when we deliver. So the strategy around pricing and what the pricing looks like and how it's presented is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And many times if you were to say, I won't name the name brand, but we would come through with pricing because you hit in certain parts of that. If you're in the retail part of that type of advertising, you're coming out on all the retail holidays, and you're repositioning the price, and the prices are all the same if you really look at the fine print, but you're repositioning it and making it and making it just look a little bit different, so that it's not the same sort of thing. But of course they have a bigger master plan back east, but I shouldn't say back east, but back, of course, this company I'm in my mind is back east, but they, so not to give anything away, but the strategy was well thought out, but the presentation to the end consumer was what I was in the middle of. So I'm just acutely aware of that. So there's obviously a huge amount of strategy that I think that, say, in a new entrepreneur, you've got your plate is really full. And sometimes, someone planted a seed of what your program, for example, should cost, or your neighbor or your competitor. So you sort of like set something out. and then you sort of forget about it. You just set it there. And does that happen? Are you following me? So they set it there because they're worried about so many everything else, and then all of a sudden, okay, how much? You have to get into an investment conversation with somebody, and they say, "Well, how much does it cost?" And then you're like, "Oh,
So actually, one of the things that we propose within the pricing world is you should never leave your pricing conversation to the last minute. And like the example that you said about the car manufacturer, at the end of it all, you put prices to your products. Believe it or not, that's not the point that they're looking at the price. Price is, if it's a sophisticated business, like I would take that large car manufacturer as an example, they probably would have started identifying and doing their feasibility studies way in advance, looking at their competition, looking at their market, looking at where they want to go, and they have an idea of where their pricing plays before they even put the sticker on the product when it's at the yard.
Sure.
But so when you look at a smaller business owner and an entrepreneur, we tend to really wait until last minute when we've set all our goals in terms of marketing, set up our assets and our marketing platforms, and then we're like, oh my goodness, I need to figure out what the price is. I advocate against that. That's really wrong, because it goes back to that point of what is your business goal? And every business exists to make a sale and a profit. So really, things that support you to make that sale and a profit should come at the very beginning of what you're doing. So you need, when you're setting up your foundations of your business, price needs to be out there. Like, it needs to be part of the things that you're discussing. How am I going to the market? Because the price that you choose communicates to your customer your position, so that people can decide, am I going to work with you or am I not going to work with you? It attracts a certain clientele to you, but it also repels a certain clientele to you. And you want to take advantage of that. So that communication piece that you're talking about is very critical.
Well, I think so. I mean, I've done that before, where you start, we just talk about crunching the numbers. You say, wait a minute, I'm going to have to sell 7 million of those to break even, or whatever. I'm just using it as imagination, but it's like, if that comes at the last minute, you can have that second thoughts. You start having second thoughts if you don't crunch some basic numbers at least. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. So I like to, because the series is called the $1 Million Story Series, I'm gonna, there's a journey that brought you here. I can obviously see that you're educated in this field. You love the experience. It turns you on to work on pricing, and that's really kind of amazing. And so, but how did you get here? I always say, sometimes I even say, how did you get to be on the show today? Which is a open-ended question, but there's a journey. There's been. I know that you're a mom and a family person, and just so let us hear about that. A little bit of
backstory. Yeah, so let's go way back, right? Way back. So I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm originally from Kenya. So my home is in Kenya, in Africa, and I was born and raised there. My family, most of them are still there, actually. And so growing up in a family of 5 girls with my parents, there was always, just back from our culture, there's always the push to want to better yourself, because you come from a marginalized country with an environment where if you do not push yourself through education, you probably have very little chance of succeeding in the world. So I grew up in such a family. I grew up with a very strong mother who understood that, the odds are against you. And the odds are against you, especially if you're a woman. But then because of that, you have to stand out from the crowd and do everything that you can to make sure that you're successful. So I had that upbringing where I knew that my life depends on me pushing and pushing myself. And also that my mother and both my father as well, they taught us to be very independent, like completely depend on ourselves. And my mom used to say something like, if you ever got married, don't lay all your baskets in your husband, because if your husband decided to up and leave one day, you have to know that if you have kids, you're the mother, you're the provider of your child. So if your husband went away, you will pick up where he's left, and you still do it by yourself. And I'm not saying that anything wrong about husbands and marriage, but that's sort of the perspective I grew up understanding, that I want to be able to be self-sufficient. So in the event I was to do this by myself, I can support myself and my family. So I had that strong upbringing to make sure that I pursue my dream. So I really worked hard in school. I went to the university in the big city, Nairobi, and I remember that time. It was literally one of the first few times I had gone to the city because I grew up in a very small town. I went to the city, Nairobi, brand new, like all these things everything was lavish. So I pursued my education there. I did a Bachelor of Commerce degree, so in marketing, and I really loved it. I really, really loved it. I came out of school and I worked for a multinational company, which was the very first exposure I had to business. And not just business, but because I grew in ranks, I was I was a training coordinator, then I was in marketing, then I was in sales. And when I was in sales, I was actually overseeing our regional office within the sub-Saharan Africa. And I would travel to the different countries within Africa, at the same time travel to our corporate office, which was in China. So I traveled quite a lot, and it exposed me to senior leadership. It exposed me to how businesses work. And I really, really did enjoy it. At that point, I was doing something related to pricing, but I didn't call it pricing because I would work quotes and I would work proposals in the process of selling our services to other companies. It's actually the largest telecommunication company in the world right now. So I worked with that company for close to 4 or 5 years. But then as I progressed in that career ladder, and mind you, on the side, I had a side hustle with my sister. We were running a catering business because we wanted to sort of augment additional income in our business. And so that was my next motivation. Like the more and more I worked, it got to a point where I couldn't get past a managerial level that I had. And I felt like it was a little bit unfair that opportunities were being passed by me and I was equally qualified. I started to look for other jobs within Nairobi and just to apply to big companies that I admired. And I kept doing that. And I never really, really got a chance to just get another job or get promoted. So my income stagnated. Here I was working in a multinational company, but at some point I felt inadequate in terms of I wasn't making enough money or my managers were not recognizing me to give me that level of promotion. And I started to ask myself, what's out there for me? Like what next? Because this cannot be it. Based on just my understanding of what the future needs to look like and how I was pushing myself, I wasn't going to allow that to be it. So at that point, and I'm sorry to go down in memory lane and rambling, but I remember at that point, my sister talked to me, and she was in the United States at the time. She was pursuing her master's degree. She has since moved back. But she talked to me when she was in the US, and she said, Christine, you're a perfect candidate to go to an MBA school because MBA elevates you to the level that you want to go. She said, consider doing that. And I didn't really want to do it. I didn't want to leave my country. I didn't want to leave my family. But then, so 1 year passed, then a second year passed, and nothing was happening. There was no movement in my life. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this. Let me try and see if I can make changes. So I looked at a couple of business schools within the US, and I looked at testimonials of people who had gone through business school, and it looked really, really like what I wanted. People were getting into corporate America, earning well into the 6 figures. And I really desired that. And I desired that independence to just be my own person and find a craft. So I took the leap. I applied for multiple schools in the US. I was accepted in one of the universities in upstate New York, University of Rochester. And then a big burden just landed on us. Like it was a private school, a very expensive private school. And I was like, oh, if I sell my car, I might be able to afford to pay for the tuition. But then I compared the Kenya shillings into dollars. It wasn't going to work out. So I was able to actually apply for a scholarship, and I got like 55% of the scholarship, which was really great. So I hustled, my family and I hustled to sort of cover the difference. And I came to the US. This was about close to 10 years ago. And I came to University of Rochester. The first year, that's when I attended a class that was called Pricing Policies, a Pricing Policies class. The lecturer was very, very on point. Like he was very good, the professor. And I sort of connected with the professor, then connected with the class, because sometimes it happens like that. The person who's delivering the message to you could make it sound different than somebody else. So I really enjoyed that class. I took an internship and came back in the second year, and I was very clear in what I wanted to do. I understood what pricing was, and I connected it back to what I did in the telecommunication company, and I 100% knew that's what I wanted. So I immersed myself in that world of pricing. I was part of the pricing club, and I actually became the president of the pricing club within the school. At one point, I was a teaching assistant for one of the professors for pricing, and I just fell in love with the subject. I really fell in love with the subject, and I thought it's really a critical way. At that point, when I was thinking about working for a company, it's a way that you make a difference in an organization. And I jumped in, and I was able to get a full-time job that enabled me to actually do just that. And since then, I have just been in pricing, and that's kind of like the backstory. And sorry to ramble for so long.
No, that's honestly, that's how I work. I it's all out there, and then, what I like to look for is, I call it kind of connecting the dots. Mm-hmm. You've got all these dots, that inspiration that your mother instilled in you, and it's almost like a way of life that you adopted, a philosophy, and then you can, if you had a 2-minute window to jump on stage somewhere, you'd have to go, well, that's what my mom told me to do, because you need to provide, and you need to do this yourself if you have to, and then leapfrog ahead to, I moved around and got as much education as I could, and I kept wanting to get better, wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford my education by even selling my car, but I figured it out because I need to know how to provide for myself. And I'm so interested in this, and I'm here to help you price your product so you can live a life that's you're self-supporting, you're self-sufficient.
Financial independence.
Exactly. So you've got it all. And that's just, sometimes you have to spill it all out, because then I have my clients put it all on 3x5 cards, because some of this stuff isn't as linear. We don't think really linear. And if all of a sudden you forgot about that, oh yeah, that's right, I took that 6 months job in Nairobi that was, I had a mean boss. I'm just making this up, but but sometimes those things are inspirations and actually have something to do with how the journey. So that's why, if you've got a once upon a time story and you're writing it on a manuscript, sometimes it's hard to insert that in because you're thinking in this sort of like linear way. But no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I just, as a side note, I was in Nairobi quite a while ago. Very, very beautiful. And
yes, it
was my only time over there, but I always swore that I would love to go back because of how, spend some time out in that part of Africa for a bit. It was a bit so incredible. So
yes, it is.
So do you feel that you're on a mission to help people with this pricing to just make their businesses better? There's a reason that you're so interested in it. What is that?
Very good question. I feel like within the pricing community, there are very few people. And when I look at all those people, they're almost all very passionate about it. And maybe it comes from the point of view of an underdog, because in pricing, you're always working with salespeople and marketing people. When you look at sales and marketing as a field, it's very strong. It's been there for the longest time, and there are a lot of gurus around that area. When you look at just pricing in itself, most of the time it's absorbed under marketing. So the people who are just pricing managers, pricing consulting companies, all understand, that sort of like, you're like is it a David and a Goliath type of a story? So you're like the small man, but that small man counts. And so we're kind of like ambassadors, and we want to spread the gospel of really just how pricing is very, very critical for any company. So it comes from that point of view of me wanting to present my craft, defend my craft, and educate people about it. So I'm coming from a point of passion of educating the people that you can actually leverage this and look at this in a way that it is independent and it is self-sustaining, and it can help you in your business. I think that's the point of view where it's coming from.
Right. Do you feel that, I know we talk about this a lot, do you feel like you've discovered this gap? I feel that in my story part. I think that's something that it gets folded in, and that's okay if you have a kind of guru type of system going on, but when you have to have some intensity in that topic, you need to, like you say, you need to come in and really spend some focus on that. And
there's definitely a gap. Like, and the main gap that I've discovered is twofold. One, having worked in a corporate America, large company, like a huge large company that is a leader in pricing, I understand very well, and I know I can count like maybe up to 7 top consulting companies, heavy, that work with big brands that you can think about, whether it's a consumer brand or like you're talking about automotive brand. Those big organizations all have, I would call a pricing consulting, or they have an in-house pricing department.
So and a department. I was going to say they have.
They usually have an in-house pricing department, and the pricing manager and specialist, analysts and specialists that literally just oversee the profitability of the business. Mm-hmm. When you look at small companies, they cannot afford that. Like most of small companies don't have an in-house consultant. Most of the time, it's the marketing manager or the sales manager also talking about prices. So to me, that signals that there's a lack of education. First of all, there's a lack of resource to actually even just have that. And because you're lacking the resource in-house to tell you about that, it's highly likely that you're missing the fact that opportunity exists for your business to differentiate itself and actually capitalize on just that pricing to be successful. So I'm coming in to fill that gap for the small businesses and entrepreneurs that lack that in-house pricing counsel, as you could call it. And then the second gap that I look at when you think about the gurus and the marketing gurus out there, most of what they do talk about pricing. They talk about pricing, but from a point of view of selling and marketing. So it's great that they talk about that, but it's also just a small portion of it. There's a small portion of it. With the pricing education that I have, like in my MBA, I graduated with marketing and pricing. Like I took about 6 different classes in pricing. And so there's a lot, like there's a whole breadth of it that gets removed when a marketing guru just packages pricing as part of sales or marketing. There's a whole lot more that gets left out. So those 2 gaps, I come in to support the small person and the small business that doesn't have an in-house pricing department, but I also come in to expand that knowledge from just one module within your program to like an in-depth practice and it can be handheld. I can either work directly with you, or I can show you how to work to attain what you want to do. So yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of mindset involved in the whole thing. And I think even in terms of mindset for me is like we've been talking about the gurus, the general, mm-hmm. and we talk about organizations, and sometimes, the word coaching is an interesting thing, where coaching is there's not just ever, like in a professional sports team, there's never one coach. There's a head coach, there's a quarterback coach, there's an offensive coach, a defensive coach, there's a strength coach. There's, it's a team. So in these kinds of things that we're talking about, there is, it's a team. So if we were going to bring in, sometimes when you talk about hiring out for like consultants, and I'm in a coaching program, I'm in a coaching program, but everything changed for me when I said that this is part of my team. It's not like, oh, I'm a student here. No, this is my strategy team. It's my strategy team. And so you are actually introducing yourself as part of their team. Mm-hmm. For me, it's a real difference of understanding how my organization is flowing when I think of it that way, instead of, okay, now I'm going to take a day off to talk to this specialist, and then I'm going to go back into my organization. No, that person, that specialist is in your organization. Yeah. And for me, that really helps my way of thinking about that stuff. So, so you're on people's teams. So just on a personal level, so how are you balancing okay with your family and I know that you've got a young one, right? Yeah. That's a challenge for everybody. I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. She's almost 2 years old. She's going to be 2 years in the last day of December. She was born on the last day of December. And that's the only one that we have right now. But I also have my husband who also has a full-time job himself. So it does get a little bit challenging, especially with COVID, knowing that there's very little that you can do. So we're all, of course, working from home because that's almost like what everybody's doing right now. It's a challenge in a way that first, I love being with her throughout the day. Like, even though I'm doing the business, but just being at home and her being at home, and she can pop into the office anytime she wants to. It's just a blessing. I think we're living in unprecedented times, both in bad but in good. In bad in a way that people are suffering every single day, and if you are close to someone who has gotten sick, it really shakes you. So it's a really different time. But at the same time, I remember, I think around March or April, when everybody was starting to shut down, I listened to, I forget his name, I think he's David someone, but he's a leader he talks about mindset, but he's a leader in mindset. And he was talking about the great pause. And he said that human beings have been given an opportunity that has never happened before. And not to say that it's not a bad thing that's happening, it is, but he called it the great pause. Like we've been running so fast and we've been moving so fast in everything that we do, that it takes like a catastrophe for everybody to just stop. Like your life is moving too fast. You just need to stop and like be in the moment, appreciate the little things that you haven't appreciated in the past, And I in the beginning, I saw it like that. Like we've tried to protect our family. We social distance as much as we can, but I also see that opportunity as that pause. Like I have never spent so much time that I have, unless the maternity period. Like when I was out for maternity, I've never spent so much time with my daughter as much as both of us have, and we really, really cherish that. So we see that as a blessing. The challenge is when we cannot go out and have play dates. Or we cannot, she's now a toddler and she's very, very high energy. She constantly wants to be outside. We love going to restaurants, but we cannot do that anymore. We cannot like just go and hang out and have a play in restaurants, play at outside and just be with other kids. So that makes me feel bad. Like as an example is the whole time we've had her, she's never been to a daycare. Our plan was to put her in daycare when she turned 9 months. That was the plan that we had. So we had someone taking care of her in the house. And then we had her on schedule to get into a daycare for 9 months because we figured that's the time, like she's old enough to get acquainted and she needs that social environment. But because of COVID, the daycare had to cut their capacity. And at some point they had to shut down. So all the places that we were on the wait list, she's never been able to get in. But even if she would be able to get in, I'm uncertain if I could put her in right now. So her whole life, almost 2 years, she's been at home. That really pains me actually in a way, because she doesn't have a social environment, and she needs that. Like that's the biggest challenge for us. Like she's just missing out on a lot of life out there. So we try to like shower her with all of our attention. We take her to the park, but I think it's definitely still insufficient.
Well, I think like what's happened with, a lot of adults and, non-toddlers, jump on a Zoom call and sort of it's a substitute. It's not the same for sure, but it sort of temporarily is solving the problem. Mm-hmm. But you can't, we have that's not how a toddler is going to learn how to be socialized. That's interesting. So I guess related to this topic would be so your business is probably far reaching, right? You don't have physical constraints. You can be anywhere.
Through the internet, yes.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yes. No physical constraints. I can be anywhere through the internet. That's the kind of world we're living in right now.
Right. But it doesn't limit our reach, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. And almost in some cases for the the people that are new entrepreneurs, mm-hmm. Think that, it's like, this is the worst time. This is the worst possible time. It's
absolutely
like,
not.
Absolutely not.
Not. Absolutely not. Even before COVID, a lot of companies, if you follow the retail industry, a lot of businesses have been shutting down. Like big box stores were shutting down before COVID. And it's because every consumer was moving online. And so all these other companies, Lord and Taylor, whether they're selling clothes or they're selling, Toys R Us like went out of business because they were not able to compete on the marketplace with other online retailers. There's Amazon, and also not just Amazon, but every other company is moving online. So we were way underway to get to the online marketplace even before COVID hit. I feel like this just hastened it. And I think it's definitely going to change the landscape for the long term, like the way we shop and the way business is done. And even B2B businesses now are moving online to try and leverage the online platform to manage their business. So I don't think it's a game changer in a positive way, but I don't think it's impossible for a new business owner to actually start a business.
Right.
Unless it's a really physical business that you have to be, in your brick and mortar store. And I can't think of any right now, but I'm sure there's some businesses that, like if you have a massage parlor, for instance, you have to be there. So those kind of businesses definitely are hurting, and it is sad they're hurting. But there's also there are other businesses that can move their businesses online.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's new territory. It's definitely uncharted territory for many of us, but for the entire world, honestly, because I know that we've had these types of things happen in a global event like this happen, but with different technology and different, in a different age of technology. And so it's obviously different. Yeah. So if I were, or any of the listeners would be going, wow, Christine knows what she's talking about. And this is something I have paid so little attention to. And, this is kind of sparking a little bit of intrigue. And also this gap, so what happens in gaps, you fall into gaps. You're like, you're walking along and you fall right into it. So I don't want anyone to fall into a gap. So if you have, here's what I'm getting at. How do we find you?
No, it's a long way of getting to that. Oh yeah, yes. Sure. So my company is called Profit Lead Consulting. So if anybody wants to get hold of me, they can go to my website, profitleadconsulting.com, or they can find me on Facebook. I feel like a lot of us are on Facebook lately. So you can find me on Facebook at Profit Lead Consulting, and you can send me a message there. You can contact me on the website, and I'll reply to you, and I'll be happy to help anybody who's in the journey and discovering that gap and looking to fill that gap.
Mm-hmm. Could you in a nutshell, I know it's pretty wide open. I have the same sort of, it's not so narrow, my niche, because it can apply to almost anybody. It just depends what progression in their timeline they are. In a nutshell, would you be able to describe who you serve?
Yes. So I serve both service-based entrepreneurs and product-based entrepreneurs, whether they're early in their businesses or three. I should make it just simple, right? I serve both product-based and service-based entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their sales and profitability, whether they're early in their businesses or actually they're mature in their businesses, but they're getting challenges with the growing pains of scaling. So anybody who's as young as 1 year and anyone who's even just as old as 10 years or greater, but they're looking to optimize their profits and sales, I serve all those.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think that it's just everyone wants to have a welcome card, and understand that and then take a conversation from there and move forward.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. Well, Christine Voreza.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at that our entire show. I know that you coached me on that earlier. So
Voreza,
and from Fort Worth, Texas, which doesn't really matter because we're a worldwide organization right now.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming on this morning and talking to us and telling us, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story, because I think that's from my gap, that's where people get inspired. They see themselves in that timeline and say, well, I'm right in that position. Somebody's told me, no, you can't do that my whole life. And Christine just said, yes, you can.
Yes. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I truly believe that you can be whatever you want to be. Like I look back at myself sometimes when I get challenges and I'm stuck or stumbled and I want to move forward, I always take a moment to remember where I came from. And by that, I don't mean the country, but I mean the small village that I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And then being successful in a big city. And if I was able to do that and also being successful working in corporate America, which to me at that point, when I was back in Kenya, I thought it was unattainable. So I look at that journey and I tell myself, I've done that. I can do freaking anything. And I remind myself of that every time. And I think it's like you said earlier, it's a mindset thing. Once we tell ourselves, it's the story that we tell ourselves. Our limitations usually just stay within our minds. But when you start to tell yourself a positive story and you cover that with gratitude and of the journey that you've taken, it reminds you that there's a whole lot more that you're capable of than what you give yourself a credit for. So I truly believe in that.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that was what I was looking for. You gave the audience something to think about, and that's the inspiring message that I'm looking for. So thank you for doing that. So I, of course, will put your contact information in when we share our video around and archive and push it around, and people will be able to get to you with a click of a button.
All right.
And I'm really excited for that. And I want to thank you, Christine, one more time for being on what I call the $1 Million Story series. Yeah. So thanks again. My name is Keith Salmon, and this is an installment of the $1 Million Story series. I would like to encourage you to join my Facebook group. It's called the $1 Million Story Ninjas, where we talk about this journey that each and every one of us have. We all have our own personal journey. We all have our personal stories. And we're like, I discussed it earlier a couple of weeks ago. We all have, our stories are like fingerprints. They're unique. They're like snowflakes. They're completely 100% unique. And if you have, like Christine says, yes, you can. You can do anything based on no matter where you come from. And I really appreciate that, Christine. And so with that, I'm going to sign off. And thanks so much for joining us today. And that's it. So we'll see you on the next episode of the $1 Million Story series. My name is Keith Salmon. And thank you once again, Christine Voreza.
Thank you, Keith.